I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We are living in an era where any anime franchise can seemingly come back out of nowhere and get more content. And today we have a fresh example of that in Trigun. Specifically, the upcoming Trigun Stampede series coming out next year in 2023. This was revealed a couple weeks ago and was, funnily enough, actually leaked on Twitter about a week prior to that, which is always interesting when just some random person on Twitter ends up being right and something ends up actually happening from it. So I guess that leaker can have a little more credence given to their other leaks in the future. But Trigun Stampede is a new TV anime for Trigun, of course, that is going to be entirely CGI. Done by Studio Orange specifically. Now, Studio Orange did help out with the CG elements of the Trigun movie about a decade ago, but you most likely recognize them from two productions in particular, being Land of the Lustrous and Beastars. Now, this is a major point of contention in most discussions surrounding this upcoming project so far. You either like what Studio Orange has done and you like their CG anime, or you don't. And most of what people have been debating regarding this series is just, do they like how it looks? Do they not like how it looks? Do they like the idea of it being a CG Studio Orange anime, or do they not? And I think too much of the discussion and the arguments are about this because you're not really going to get anywhere with arguments like this because it's all just personal preference at the end of the day. It's, do you like this type of visual aesthetic or not? And yelling at someone because they may or may not like it doesn't really help. You're not going to be able to change their opinion because there's nothing right or wrong about it. It is just an opinion on visual taste. So if you feel one way about it or the other, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. There's no correct opinion. It's just whatever you feel like. You either like it or you don't. Personally, I'm not truthfully the biggest fan. I don't really like Studio Orange. I did not like how Land of the Lustrous looked. I know that's sacrilege for some people to hear, but I really didn't like it. I felt like the characters moved in very unnatural ways, which is one of the biggest issues I have with CG anime. I think Beastars got away with that a little bit more simply because they're not, human characters. They're animal people. And my brain was able to sort of be like, okay, well, even if they move weird or kind of in a stilted way, it's like, okay, well, they're not people. It's okay. And you could say, well, Land of the Lustrous, they're not people, but they look like people. They're rock people. They actually look like humans. So when they move awkwardly, it doesn't feel right. So personally, I didn't like how either of those shows particularly looked. I'm not a fan of Studio Orange, and this is not something that I look at positively. I do wish it was being done by a different studio, not in CG. I understand Studio Orange has apparently been working on this for 5 years somehow, which is, that's remarkable, but I know I'm not going to care for how this looks. And we do have a short PV out of Anime Expo, and thankfully I waited until after Anime Expo to make this video because we got quite a decent bit of information out of that. So I don't really like how it looks based on the PV, and while you shouldn't judge too much from that, like you can't make too many sweeping generalizations from one PV, knowing how Studio Orange tends to do things, I don't really like how this is going to go, and I'd be lying if I said I don't wish for this to do terribly well, if only because it means I don't have to watch a show that I know isn't going to suit my personal tastes. But that all being said, if this ends up being well received, I certainly will check it out. I'm not going to let the visual issues that I have prevent me from watching it. I just would prefer to not have to watch it, if that makes sense. But that being said, if you feel differently, Perfectly fine. There's no right or wrong way to feel about this. It's all just personal preference. And I think there are way more interesting and important things to talk about regarding Trigun Stampede than just the animation. So I'm going to move on from that, and I think people in general should try and move on from it because it's a roundabout kind of debate that doesn't go anywhere. So, when a Trigun anime, a new installment in Trigun, was first revealed, most people thought and wanted something in particular, that being a complete readaptation of the Trigun manga and presumably going into Trigun Maximum, which is the sequel manga to the original Trigun manga, because I believe the magazine that was publishing the original Trigun manga went out of business, so the manga got canceled and had to come back later, which is what Maximum is. Obviously, if that's what this was going to be, it'd probably be called Trigun Maximum, but that's what most people wanted. They wanted a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood type reboot to cover the manga more accurately, because the original Trigun really didn't. There are some things that it covers correctly, not that that's wrong, or I don't mean correct in terms of quality, but in terms of accuracy. But it does deviate quite a bit and does tell its own story, and that's perfectly fine. I haven't read the Trigun manga. I don't care if it's accurate or not. But that's what people wanted. That's what a lot of people hoped that this would be. It's not. It's 100% not that, because they have described this show, specifically out of Anime Expo, as anime original. So it's not an adaptation of the original Trigun manga. It's not an adaptation of Maximum. It's something completely different. So that's probably going to disappoint a lot of people, because I'm sure that's really what people wanted, what most people wanted this to be. But that's not what it is, for better or for worse. Now, the next thing that most people would have wanted this to be is probably just something in the continuity of the original Trigun, whether that be a sequel, whether that be a prequel, or something else. That's probably what people would have wanted next. And it's probably not that either. I would say probably a 95% chance it's not that. I almost certainly it's not. The reason why is because whenever they have discussed this show so far, especially out of Anime Expo, they're describing it as a new show, as something separate from the original Trigun, as not Trigun coming back, but as if it's coming out for the first time. While they haven't 100% definitively said separate continuity, separate universe, it's almost certainly that. So, anime original, alternate universe, Trigun anime. Which is an interesting way to go. I don't think people would have expected this at all. And while it will certainly disappoint people that it's not the manga adaptation, that it's not in the continuity of the original show, it does offer some interesting possibilities. Now, some of the ways that we can further confirm that this is its own separate continuity is just some of the pieces of information we've gotten regarding Stampede. There's some aesthetic differences, like Vash has a completely different character design, which some people like, some people don't. I think it's fine. Even if I don't like how it's animated, I think it looks fine. The cast has been completely changed, which isn't too unusual in Japan when something comes back after a while. Like, typically they do recast, but if this was in the same continuity, you'd think they'd try not to do that. So, new voice for Vash, new voice for Knives, new voice for Rem. And those are the only characters that are confirmed to be in this so far, which is interesting, and we'll get back to that. But those two attributes, as well as the one I'll discuss in a second, further suggest this is a separate continuity, because they're changing little things here and there. The big thing that I think solidifies this as a separate continuity, beyond just what they've said at Anime Expo, is Vash's bounty. Now, if you look at the promotional material for this show, when it was first officially announced, and also after Anime Expo, now that we have Vash's full wanted poster, throughout all of that, his bounty has been depicted as $6 million double dollars. And you'll notice that is not what Vash's bounty is supposed to be. in Trigun, the original Trigun, and in the manga, Vash's bounty is 60 billion double dollars. Now, a lot of people have looked at the difference in the bounty and said, oh, maybe this is a prequel. Maybe it's still set in the original Trigun, but it's earlier on, and that's why Vash has a lower bounty. That's why Vash looks different. That's why, explaining away a lot of these changes. The problem with that theory, at least if you take it literally, like a literal prequel to the original Trigun, is that Vash's bounty was never anything other than 60 billion. He went from having no bounty to getting his 60 billion double dollar bounty, and that's it. He didn't accrue a bounty little by little over time. So because of that, this can't be a literal prequel. Now, it could theoretically still be something that's like a pseudo prequel, in that it might take place, early on in Vash's career, and that could explain Vash looking different, but you can't slot this into the original Trigun's continuity because the bounty does not make sense. Vash should not have any bounty other than 60 billion. So to me, this is a very easy way and a simple way to show, yes, this is a separate continuity, because Vash should not have this bounty. Now, maybe in this continuity, that's just what his bounty is. Maybe he'll just always have 6 million double dollar bounty. Or maybe in this continuity, it will grow over time. Maybe he'll start with 6 million, and maybe by the end of the series, he'll have the 60 billion. But the simple fact that Vash's bounty should not be anything other than 60 billion says immediately this is a separate universe. This is a separate continuity. This is a separate story. And I think the reason they wanted to go in this direction is probably because it gives them a lot of freedom. It allows them to play with things, here and there, like Vash's design, like his bounty, like the voice actors. They can play with things in whatever way they want and tell whatever type of story they want without having to worry too much about how it would reflect on the original Trigun. It reminds me a lot, actually, of Code Geass Lelouch of the Resurrection, right? So, Lelouch of the Resurrection was first announced as, oh my god, we're getting a third season of Code Geass. And then they were like, oh no, it's a movie. And then ultimately, it ended up being a separate continuity from the original Code Geass show. It ended up being part of the new recap movie continuity that changed a lot of things from the original series, making it so that movie cannot take place in the continuity of the show. And I think why they did that in that case, why Sunrise did that, was because it allowed them to have their cake and eat it too. They got to make more Code Geass, make money off the fact that they were making more Code Geass, revisiting this popular franchise, without pissing people off if they didn't like the movie, because it does not in any way reflect on the original Code Geass. If you hate Lelouch of the Resurrection, doesn't matter. It doesn't change the ending of the original show in any way, shape, or form. It has no impact on it because it's a separate universe. It's possible the reason why this is a separate universe is because if it goes down the drain and doesn't do very well, people won't be pissed at it as much because it does not in any way reflect on the original Trigun's continuity. It doesn't change it. It doesn't alter it. It's its own separate world, and they can do whatever they want without pissing people off too much if it doesn't go the right way and isn't received too well. It's very sly, but it's smart if that's what they want to do. Now, like I said, this could still be a pseudo prequel in a sense. It might be Vash's early days, especially because, like I said, we've only had 3 characters confirmed so far: Vash, Knives, and Rem. No Insurance Girls, no Wolfwood, no Legato, no anybody else, which might suggest they just haven't been revealed yet, and maybe they'll show up immediately. Or they just might not show up at all, or maybe only at the end. If this is like a pseudo prequel, a pseudo, here's Vash's early days just in a new universe, maybe they'll show up at the end, and maybe that's when Vash will have his normal bounty, maybe that's when all these characters will get introduced, and maybe they'll even go further beyond that in some sort of eventual continuation of this. Who knows? Point being, I don't think it's wrong to speculate it might be Vash's early days, but I think people need to recognize that assuming this is a prequel because of the bounty doesn't make any sense, because Vash's bounty should never have been less than 60 billion. So in my mind, this is almost certainly a alternate universe, separate continuity, anime original story. Now, I'm sure people would be disappointed about that, but it does allow for some interesting possibilities, and I feel like that's what really should be discussed concerning this, rather than just the animation quality. So that's about all I want to say about this. I do think it'll be interesting to see if they bring back the English cast for Trigun. I mean, I imagine Johnny will come back. I would be very surprised if they don't get him back unless there's some sort of mandate not to, which sometimes happens. Like, I believe that happened with Ghost in the Shell Arise, where they were told, no, you can't bring back the original cast. They would have to recast Knives regardless, unfortunately, but I'm curious if they would get Bridget Hoffman back for Rem. I really like Bridget Hoffman, but she hasn't been in a lot lately, so it'd be interesting if they managed to grab her for this or not. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And regardless, what do you think about this? Are you looking forward to new Trigun? Are you excited for Studio Orange and CG, or are you not? Are you happy that this is most likely its own separate anime original continuity, or do you wish this was either in the continuity of the original Trigun or a Brotherhood-style adaptation of the manga? And what do you think about some of the changes we've already seen? Vash's new bounty, his new character design, his new voice, things like that. Whatever you think, leave those down in the comments below. I'm really curious what your thoughts are on this. Anyway, that's it for me. Take care, and I'll see you next time.